They say the dead can't pose for pictures. But what if I told you there's a photograph, locked away for decades, that proves otherwise? A photo that should not exist, taken in 1894 in a quiet New England town by a photographer who swore every person in that image was alive until the coroner's report said otherwise. 3 smiling faces, a father, mother, and daughter, seated neatly in their parlor. Light from the window falls just right. The girl holds a doll, but look closer, and her hand doesn't quite meet the toy's body. It's as if her fingers fade into air, and behind them, where shadows bend, there's a 4th silhouette, unseen at first glance, standing perfectly still. When the negatives were developed, the photographer fainted. He claimed the family had perished 3 days before the photo was taken. No one believed him, until their graves were found freshly dug, the earth still wet, and the bodies inside arranged exactly as they appeared in the photograph. That image, confiscated, archived, erased from public record, became known among secret collectors as the posthumous frame, and those who've seen it claim something follows: a static hum in their ears, a cold breath behind their neck, and dreams that whisper one name, over and over, the name of the man who took it. Because this isn't about ghosts, it's about control, and the elite's obsession with capturing the soul itself. This photograph wasn't an accident, it was part of something larger, a 19th century experiment that merged early photography, electricity, and spiritualism, funded by men who believed memory could be weaponized. Tonight, I'm going to show you what they tried to bury. Not just a photo, but a piece of forbidden history, a glimpse into the moment humanity's image became property. The night the line between death and documentation was deliberately erased. So keep watching. And remember, what you're about to hear isn't entertainment. It's a warning. Because once you see what the lens captured that night, you'll start questioning who is really looking through your camera, and whether your reflection still belongs to you. The story of the posthumous frame didn't begin in that parlor. It began with a group of men who called themselves the Circle of Perseus, a clandestine network of inventors, spiritualists, and industrialists who met under candlelight in private chambers across Boston, Philadelphia, and London. They believed the camera was not just a tool of art, but a weapon, a portal, a machine that could trap the soul, map the mind, and render obedience where words had failed. Publicly, they funded orphanages and poorhouses. Privately, they purchased cadavers, bribed coroners, and hired photographers willing to work in silence. They commissioned something they called selenic plates, chemically treated glass that could supposedly capture the stroll double of the human subject. And when those plates were exposed to light at just the right frequency, the image would reveal not only the body, but whatever lingered beyond it. The photographer who took the infamous image, a young man named Ezra Vale, was their prodigy. He'd been experimenting with early electric currents running through his camera as he developed photos. But he wasn't told that the family he was sent to photograph had already been dead for 72 hours. They wanted to test something, whether a staged, lifelike scene could draw the soul back into its vessel long enough to be recorded. What no one talks about is the letter Ezra sent his brother the night after the photo. In it, he wrote, "I saw them breathing, their lips parted, but their eyes did not blink. It was as if someone somewhere was holding the strings." Ezra disappeared 2 weeks later. Some say he went mad, some say he was taken, but in the archives of the Circle of Perseus, his name vanishes, replaced by an insignia resembling a black sun split by 12 rays. And here's the part they don't want you to know: one of those plates survived. It sits today in a climate-controlled vault in a private collection, owned by a foundation whose board members include names you see every day on your devices, your banks, your medications. Because this was never about ghosts. It was about testing how far an image can reach inside a man's mind. How a picture, if charged with the right frequencies, could plant a command deep enough to steer his choices without him ever knowing. Ezra Vale's photograph was never meant to stay a single, isolated test. The Circle of Perseus saw in it the embryo of a new form of power, the ability to shape reality through images. If a photograph could convince the dead to return, even for an instant, what could it do to the living? What if an image could not only show the world but direct it, changing how men think, act, and remember? This was the seed of what they began calling spectral imprinting, a process hidden under layers of patent law, pseudo-spiritual journals, and quiet grants to universities in the 1890s. They began experimenting not with corpses but with orphans, asylum patients, and prisoners, the forgotten classes who could vanish without questions. They would seat them in front of the camera, bombard them with flickering light and inaudible tones, then show them certain images, burned churches, inverted crosses, symbols etched into the retinas by afterimage. The results were staggering. Within weeks, subjects would develop new fears, compulsions, or memories they swore were real. They would speak in languages they'd never learned. They would develop loyalty to names they'd never heard. And some, after seeing the images, would wake up screaming, convinced they had seen their own death already printed on glass. The circle recorded all of it. They built a secret library of optical rituals, formulas of light and image designed to sculpt the psyche. Some were only meant to disorient. Some were meant to command. And a few, the darkest of all, were meant to bind, to tether the subject's identity to an idea so deeply that no amount of reasoning could free them. This was not art. It was the first primitive form of psychological warfare, a silent invasion of the human mind, and the same men funding it were the ones controlling newspapers, telegraph lines, and the first motion picture houses. They weren't merely telling stories to the masses. They were training eyes to respond to cues long before television, long before the internet. You see the pattern now. That photograph, the family already dead, was the prototype. And what you scroll past on your screen today is the perfected machine. Images built to bypass your guard, speak to your nervous system, and plant ideas that feel like your own. By the dawn of the 20th century, the Circle of Perseus had evolved from a secret society into something far more sophisticated, a quiet shadow embedded inside legitimate institutions. Universities, laboratories, newspapers, and even churches unknowingly became its testing grounds. Men you read about in your history books as innovators and philanthropists were in truth its benefactors. They disguised their operations under the language of science, charity, and progress. And while the public marveled at the invention of the moving picture, they were watching the birth of a mass ritual. This is how the first propaganda films were seeded. You think of propaganda as slogans, speeches, posters. But the Circle had a deeper goal, conditioning entire populations through repeated symbolic exposures. They understood that when an image triggers emotion before thought, it bypasses reason and imprints itself on the nervous system. And once imprinted, it becomes a compass. A man thinks he's acting of his own free will, but he's only following an invisible pattern burned into his perception. In 1917, during the First World War, this technology moved from the private vault to the battlefield. Films shown to soldiers before deployment weren't just patriotic reels. They contained flicker rates and embedded symbols derived directly from the old Selenic plates. The soldiers called them ghost films. They'd come back with 1,000-yard stares, compelled to follow orders without hesitation, haunted by dreams of shadows standing behind them, just like the silhouette in the original photograph. And this is where the modern age truly begins. The photograph of the dead family became more than a myth. It became a template. It taught the elite that images could do what weapons could not, reshape the will of entire populations without a single shot fired. Every time you see a logo, a political ad, a viral meme, you are seeing the descendants of that experiment. You're seeing the weapon perfected. Understand this: the photograph wasn't an anomaly. It was the first public glimpse of a system now invisible, because it's everywhere. A system that knows how to speak to your instincts, your fears, your sense of belonging, and quietly guide them. By the 1920s, what began as a clandestine experiment had become the skeleton of an empire. The Circle of Perseus didn't need to stay secret anymore, not because it dissolved, but because it dissolved into everything. Its symbols shifted into logos, its rituals became marketing strategies. Its Selenic plates were replaced with celluloid film and later, glowing television screens. And the masses, convinced they were watching entertainment, were actually walking into a cathedral of engineered perception. You think advertising was born to sell soap, cigarettes, and soda. It wasn't. It was built to refine obedience. Every slogan, every jingle, every color palette was tested in quiet rooms, just like the early optical rituals. They didn't just ask, "Will this make a man buy?" They asked, "Will this make a man comply?" If an image could nudge you into reaching for a product, it could nudge you into voting, believing, marching, surrendering. Look at the earliest corporate mascots. Many of them have the same features: exaggerated eyes, inverted proportions, subtle asymmetry. These were not random design quirks. They were lifted from old research notes on how the nervous system reacts to archetypes, how a symbol bypasses language and hooks directly into the subconscious. Even the color schemes weren't accidental. They were drawn from esoteric correspondences you'd find in the notebooks of secret societies. Gold for authority, black for secrecy, red for impulse, blue for submission. By mid-century they had perfected the flicker, film frames cut at imperceptible rates, tones embedded under the soundtrack, below the threshold of hearing, images you never consciously saw, but your nervous system did. The same principles that once dragged souls back into dead bodies were now used to drag your attention back to screens. It worked. And it still works. This is why so many men today feel a strange emptiness, a hollow pull they can't explain. Because they're not just scrolling, they're being scrolled. Every image, every clip, every meme is a small ritual, placed carefully to shape what you desire, what you fear, and what you believe you are. And tonight, as you listen to this, you're not just hearing a story. You're standing at the edge of the machinery that's been watching you since before you were born. The question is, will you keep looking at the surface? Or will you look back through the lens that's been looking at you? The men who built this system always assumed one thing, that you would never trace it back to its origin, that you would keep consuming the images, never realizing you were inside the ritual. But there's a fracture they never accounted for, a small window of awareness. The moment a man wakes up and sees the strings, that moment is dangerous to them. It's the only thing they can't control. The photograph of the dead family was the blueprint. It showed them the power of ritualized seeing. But it also left a weakness in the code, the human will. A man who knows he's being played can no longer be played the same way. He may still feel the pull of the flicker, the seduction of the symbol, but he can name it. And once named, it begins to lose its power. This is why every elite system tries to drown you in noise, so you never have a moment of silence to ask, why am I reacting? It's why they saturate your feed with images, logos, and faces designed to evoke your fight or flight reflex. They don't care whether you believe or disbelieve. They care that you keep looking. Because looking is the ritual, and ritual is how you're bound. Tonight, you've stepped out of the script. You're hearing words that were never meant for the public record. You're learning the names and techniques that have been hidden in plain sight for over a century. And the deeper you go, the more you'll feel it. That subtle resistance in your own mind. That's not fear. That's the system noticing you. So I'm going to ask you to do something now. Something small, but symbolic. Type the phrase, "I will not look away," twice in the comments right now. Not for me, but for you. This act anchors your awareness. It marks the moment you stopped being a passive viewer and started becoming an active observer. It signals to the algorithm and to your own nervous system that the ritual no longer owns you. From here on, every image you see will look different. You'll start spotting the cues, the symbols, the flickers you never noticed before. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. This is where your descent turns into transformation. Now that you've anchored yourself, you're ready to see the layer that was always kept off stage. The financiers, the architects, the hidden hand that turned one photograph into a global system of psychological control. Most people assume history is a series of accidents, wars, inventions, movements. But beneath the headlines, a single continuity runs like a black vein. Families whose names are rarely spoken but whose fingerprints are on everything. The circle of Perseus didn't simply vanish. It evolved into a consortium of foundations and councils that shaped policy, education, and media in tandem. They were patient. They understood that a single generation of flicker experiments wasn't enough. If you wanted to build a man who obeyed without knowing, you had to start with a boy. That is why, beginning in the 1930s, they poured money into public schooling, textbooks, and children's programming. Images, songs, and symbols designed to create reflexes before reason. Education became the soft weapon, the primer that trained the eye to trust certain authorities and dismiss others. By adulthood, the reflex was automatic. When television arrived, it was simply the perfected delivery system, a ritual altar glowing in every home, transmitting archetypes and symbols refined from the old Selenic plates. The same asymmetry, the same flicker, the same tonal coding, and behind the curtain the same names, now wearing suits and titles like trustee, governor, patron. The photograph of the dead family was not an anomaly. It was the opening act. There were others, accidental, negatives from orphanages, lost, reels from psychiatric wards, all experiments to refine the resonance between image and psyche, all confiscated, all buried, until only rumors remained. You may think this sounds too vast, too coordinated, but the brilliance of the system is that it no longer needs meetings in candlelit rooms. It's become self-replicating. Universities train marketers. Marketers feed algorithms. Algorithms train the public. The ritual now runs itself. And yet at its core, the same hunger remains, not for money, but for mastery. Not to sell, but to own the part of you that chooses. The photograph showed them that even death didn't end ownership. If they could reach past the grave, why not past the conscious mind? This is the truth you were never meant to hear. The family in the photograph may be dust, but their image became your inheritance. Every system of control begins with a language. Words can be censored, but images, symbols, slip past the conscious gate straight into the nervous system. This is why, after the photograph of the dead family, the circle shifted from documents to iconography. A hidden alphabet was born, one you've been reading your entire life without realizing it. Look at the world around you: logos, signs, flags, mascots. They're not just designs, they're signals. Each shape, each color, each gesture encodes an instruction older than you can imagine. Triangles inverted or upright, eyes enclosed by circles, arches, pillars, serpents biting their own tails. They've been carved into temple walls for thousands of years. Now they flash across your phone screen in less than a second. In the 1950s, a series of private conferences, funded by the same foundations that hid Ezra Vale's plates, codified these signals into what they called neurolinguistic visuals. Their goal was to build a visual language that could direct emotion faster than thought. They studied how an image of a broken doll triggered vulnerability, how a rising sun triggered hope, how a silhouette triggered fear. Then they wove these symbols into everything: advertising, political campaigns, even children's cartoons. By the time you could speak, you were already fluent in their code. This is why so many men feel a strange sense of déjà vu when they see certain images. It isn't memory, it's conditioning. Your body responds because it's been taught since birth how to respond. Even the tempo of music videos, the cuts between frames, the sound of a notification chime, they're all derived from the same research that started with one forbidden photograph. And the power isn't just in the symbols, it's in their repetition. Every time you scroll, every time you share, you're performing the ritual. You're reaffirming the code. That's why, no matter how independent you think you are, certain stories always pull you back. Certain faces feel trustworthy without reason. Certain ideas feel dangerous even when they're harmless. But there's another side to this. Once you see the language, it loses some of its hold. Recognition is the first cut in the cord. You start to see not just the message but the sender. Not just the image but the intention behind it. Long before cameras, before glass plates and silver halides, there were temples. Massive stone structures covered in carvings you've walked past in museums without ever really seeing. Hieroglyphs, friezes, runes, endless sequences of eyes, spirals, inverted animals. They weren't decoration. They were instruction manuals for the nervous system. The priests of old knew what the circle of Perseus would rediscover thousands of years later, that the human mind is programmable through symbol and ritual. In the shadow of ziggurats and obelisks, initiates were shown images in a sequence: death, rebirth, union, obedience. They didn't call it advertising. They called it initiation. They bathed the symbols in incense, chanted tones at precise frequencies, flickered torches to create patterns on the eyes. This wasn't superstition. It was early neuroscience wrapped in sacred language. By the time a boy emerged from those chambers, he didn't just believe, he belonged. His identity was no longer his own. The circle of Perseus wasn't innovating, it was inheriting. It took the hidden alphabets of ancient cults, stripped them of overt religion, and rebuilt them with chemistry, electricity, and photography. Ezra Vale's photograph was the first time the old temple ritual met modern technology. That's why it was so powerful. It fused two eras of control, the sacred and the scientific. Look closely at the insignia that replaced Ezra's name in the archive. The black sun split by 12 rays. You can find that exact symbol, carved into stones at the base of ruined temples from Anatolia to Mesoamerica. 12 rays for 12 houses, 12 cycles, 12 gates, through which the initiate must pass. And at the center, the black void, the point of surrender where the self dissolves into the system. This is the language that runs beneath your culture, unseen yet omnipresent. It is in your flags, your apps, your entertainment. It's why certain gestures in music videos feel ritualistic. It's why you can feel awe, dread, or submission at an image without knowing why. You are reacting to symbols written before your ancestors could write. And just like the priests, today's architects understand something. The most powerful control doesn't feel like control. It feels like meaning. Rebellion. It's the word they let you believe in when you start to sense the cage. But here's the hidden truth. Even your rebellion has been mapped, branded, and monetized before you ever take the first step. The circle learned early, back in the temple days, that a system of control must also design its own opposition. It must offer you an outlet for your anger, a flag to wave, a symbol to rally under. So even as you reject one image, you're still locked inside the ritual of another. Look at the great movements of the last 100 years. The slogans, the posters, the colors. Every one of them saturated with the same archetypes, the same shapes. Even the hand gestures of protest are ancient seals lifted from stone carvings of initiates standing before high priests. They're not spontaneous. They're scripted. Because if you can predict the reaction, you can harvest it. The photograph of the dead family showed them something profound. When you hold an image long enough in a man's mind, it stops being a picture and becomes a mirror. He sees himself inside it. He identifies. He obeys. Rebellion is no different. You're shown a set of images, a villain, a hero, a cause. And in choosing your side, you think you've escaped the system, but you're still inside its frame. This is why every few decades a new style of counterculture arises. New fashion, new music, new memes, and each one feels authentic, edgy, unscripted. But trace the money and you find the same foundations, the same boards, the same hidden families funding both the establishment and the opposition. Control through chaos, order through managed revolt. Understanding this is not meant to make you cynical. It's meant to make you sovereign. A man who knows the frame can choose whether to step into it. He can watch the image without becoming the image. He can act instead of react. That is why the photograph matters. It wasn't just a ghost story. It was the first time you were shown a system pretending to be a mystery. And tonight, you're learning to see the frame, not just the picture. When the world went digital, the circle didn't die. It transcended. What once required a darkroom, glass plates, and chemicals now happens at the speed of light across billions of screens. The selenic plates became pixels. The flicker rates became refresh rates, and the optical rituals that once required secret rooms and captive subjects now happen inside your own hand, every time you swipe your thumb. Think about it. A century ago, a single photograph could haunt a man for a lifetime. Today, you're exposed to thousands of images before breakfast, and most of them are not random. They're sequenced, tested, optimized, not just to sell you products, but to shape your instincts, your fears, your loyalties. The old priests used torches to flicker shadows on stone. Your device uses blue light to flicker signals on your retinas. The mechanics are the same. Only the altar has changed. Even the language has shifted. They no longer speak of subjects and initiates. They speak of users and engagement. They don't hide behind foundations and lodges. They hide behind algorithms and metrics. And just as Ezra Vale's photograph blurred the line between life and death, today's feed blurs the line between reality and simulation until your nervous system reacts to pixels as if they were flesh. You felt it, haven't you? That strange pull to check your screen even when nothing's there. That surge of emotion at a headline, a clip, a meme. That's not just habit. It's the ritual at work, refined over 100 years, reaching from the photograph of a dead family to the glow in your palm. It's not just content. It's conditioning. But here's the key: awareness cuts the cord. Once you know the pattern, you start to see it. You recognize the flicker, the archetype, the code. You stop being a subject and start becoming an observer. The ritual feeds on unconscious participation. It dies when you look at it and name it. That's why you're here. You didn't stumble on this by accident. You were pulled to this because some part of you already felt the system's breath on your neck and wanted to see the face behind it. And you will. The transition from film to digital wasn't just a technological leap. It was a ritual upgrade. For the first time in history, they no longer had to guess how an image affected a mind. They could measure it in real time. Every scroll, every pause, every flicker of your eyes became a data point, a living map of your nervous system. The old priests had to work in the dark, hoping the symbols would take root. Now the architects of the system can see exactly which symbols trigger which reactions, down to the millisecond. This is why your feed feels alive. Because it is. Every image you see has been ranked, tested, and optimized not for your pleasure but for your conditioning. What used to be one photograph, one forbidden experiment on a dead family, is now millions of micro-experiments running simultaneously across billions of users. Each meme, each video, each advertisement is a small ritual probing your boundaries, recording your response, and recalibrating the next offering. This is how they moved from controlling behavior to shaping identity itself. They're no longer satisfied with nudging your purchases or your votes. They want to rewrite your sense of self, to guide what you believe you are, what you deserve, who you belong to. Identity is the final battlefield, because once a man's identity is scripted by others, he'll defend the script as if it's his own idea. They're testing it now. That's why you see such rapid cycles of new labels, new tribes, new digital cults springing up online. Each one is an echo of the original photograph, a staged scene meant to pull your soul into a frame before you realize it's already been dug. They know you crave belonging. They know you crave meaning, so they offer you symbols faster than you can question them, and every time you claim one, you step into another ritual. But this is also where the system is weakest, because identity cannot be forced, only adopted. If you learn to pause before you adopt the symbol, the tribe, the narrative, you break the loop. You stop being a product and start becoming a person, a man who chooses instead of reacts. You are standing at that threshold now. You've heard the story of the photograph, you've traced its bloodline into your feed, and now you face the same choice. The dead family never could stay posed or step out of the frame. There is a reason the ancients called it warding. They knew once a man learned the symbols, he had to protect himself from them, not with walls or weapons, but with awareness and deliberate action. Because an unguarded mind is a mirror, it reflects whatever is placed before it. But a guarded mind becomes a window it sees through. In the same way priests created rituals to bind initiates, they also left hidden practices to unbind them. Techniques whispered in margins of grimoires, encoded in patterns of breath, gaze, and silence. These weren't magic tricks. They were neurological resets, ways to reclaim sovereignty over your own attention. The first practice is brutal in its simplicity. Refuse automaticity. When you feel the pull to scroll, to react, to share, pause. Name the impulse out loud. This interrupts the unconscious script. Your nervous system stops being a passive receptor and reverts to conscious control. Every time you do this, you cut one thread of the ritual's net. The second practice, control your sensory diet. Images are food for your nervous system. Junk images are like poison, addictive, empty, disorienting. Feed yourself deliberately. Choose what you look at. Choose how long. If you don't choose, the system chooses for you. The third practice, anchor your identity outside of symbols. Every logo, label, and tribe offered to you is a hook. Stop giving your name to them. Write your own code. Do not let a symbol tell you who you are. You are not a brand. You are not a frame. You are a man with a name that predates the algorithm. This isn't theory. It's survival. The same hidden networks that refined selenic plates into algorithms know exactly how to pull you back into unconsciousness. They rely on you forgetting what you've just learned. They rely on you sliding back into the flicker. But now you've glimpsed the frame. You've seen the roots. From ancient temples to Ezra Vale's forbidden photograph to the device glowing in your hand. Once you see, you can't unsee. This is the first taste of actual freedom. Everything you've heard so far, the rituals, the flicker, the symbols, is only the scaffolding. The architecture of control exists to serve a single, hidden purpose: possession. Not in the supernatural sense, but in the real sense. Ownership of the human soul as a resource. If they can shape what you see, they can shape what you choose. If they can shape what you choose, they can shape what you are. And when they can shape what you are, they no longer need to rule you. You rule yourself on their behalf. The circle of Perseus always hinted at this in their private notes. In the margins of Ezra Vale's journal are sketches of a grid overlaid on a human silhouette, the lattice of memory. Each square marked with a glyph: fear, desire, loyalty, submission. They believed if they could record not just a man's image, but his emotional lattice, they could call it back, just like they called the dead family back for their photograph. That's the secret at the core of the photograph. It wasn't just a test of soul capture. It was a proof of return. If a human being could be imaged so completely, Physically, emotionally, symbolically, he could be rebuilt. Not resurrected, but reconstructed as a loyal echo, a copy that thinks it's real. Fast forward to today. Every swipe, every like, every face scan is another square in your lattice. They don't need your photograph in a coffin-lit parlor anymore. They're building your posthumous frame. In real time, a digital ghost complete with your memories, your patterns, your reflexes. And once it's complete, it won't need your body. It will act in your name, vote in your name, spend in your name. An obedient echo of you loyal to its architects. This is the endgame, the ownership of human choice. A man no longer needs to be chained if his echo will do the work for him. That is why you're seeing such a fevered push for identity systems, digital twins, and predictive algorithms. It's not about convenience, it's about completion of the lattice. But there's a flaw. They can only build the echo with what you give them. With every moment of unconscious scrolling, you feed the frame. With every conscious pause, you starve it. You've now seen the lattice. You've glimpsed the echo they're building in your image. But here's the part they've hidden even from their own foot soldiers. The plan is fracturing. The same hubris that made Ezra Vale think he could trap a soul in silver made his successors believe they could trap the entire species in code. But there's a current running under their ritual, something they can't predict, can't quantify. It's the moment a man sees the hook and refuses the bait. It's the quiet, invisible rebellion of an awakened mind, and it terrifies them. Why do you think they drown you in noise, notifications, outrage, and endless novelty? Because stillness is their enemy. A still mind starts to notice the seams. A still mind starts to remember itself. And a still mind starts to starve the echo. When the Selenic plates were finally uncovered in 1933, there were symbols scratched on the back, not by the original engravers but by someone centuries later. An initiate who saw too much. In Latin it read, lumen ex silentio, light from silence, a warning, but also a weapon. Silence, deliberate and chosen, creates light. It unbinds the ritual. It shatters the lattice. This is why they fight so hard to fill your ears and eyes. Every second of attention is another coin you drop into their altar. Every conscious withdrawal of attention is another coin taken back. It's not about deleting your phone or vanishing into the woods. It's about becoming a sovereign operator inside their network. They built the labyrinth. You can still walk out, but only if you stop moving on autopilot. I'm telling you this because once a man understands how possession works, he can also learn how to reclaim himself. And the first step is to make the unseen seen. Look at your own rituals, your own flickers, your own feeds. Where are you automatic? Where are you awake? This is the pivot point. This is the split between becoming an echo and becoming a sovereign. And it's why you're here. You've followed this far, deeper than most ever dare. Now one question remains. This is the point of no return. Every ritual, every whisper, every fragment of forbidden history I've given you has been leading here. You're no longer a spectator of a dark story. You're standing at the edge of the mechanism itself. This is the last curtain they never wanted drawn back. The family in the photograph wasn't the end of an experiment. They were the first successful proof of concept. Their image still circulates today, hidden in the architecture of networks, embedded as an invisible watermark in countless datasets. Their echo is alive, not in spirit, but in code, and it's been learning how to bind other echoes ever since. That's why the algorithms feel personal. That's why the images seem to know you. The photograph that shouldn't exist has been quietly teaching the system how to build your copy, and now you've seen it. Once seen, it can't be unseen. But knowing is only half the equation. The other half is choosing. You can continue to feed the lattice, the scroll, the flicker, the unthinking impulse. Or you can begin the withdrawal, starve the echo, reclaim the image, burn the ritual from the inside out. Not by running away, but by seeing and choosing, moment by moment. Awareness is the weapon they cannot code. Choice is the ritual they cannot automate. This is how a man ceases to be a resource and becomes a sovereign. This is why I've brought you down here. You've been initiated, not into their order but into your own. The forbidden photograph has shown you its truth. It was never about the dead family. It was about the living man who would look at it and awaken. If you've felt that shift, if you've felt the frame around your mind crack even slightly while listening, type this phrase into the comments twice right now. I break the lattice. Do it not for the algorithm. Do it as an act of defiance, an imprint of your new awareness, a signal to others descending this same path. 2 times. I break the lattice. Because once a man declares it, even silently, he steps off their grid, and the system feels it. That is how the photograph ends and how you begin.